Hello friends, and welcome to tonight's installment of a reading of sleep stories from a collection of stories entitled The Sandman's Goodnight Stories. If you enjoy these readings, I would encourage you to subscribe so you will be notified of upcoming sleep stories. It is time to unwind. Find yourself a safe place where you can relax. Once you have made yourself comfortable, take a deep breath. You can hear the sound of the gentle wind. It has blown long before us and will blow long after us. Your day is done. There is nothing left for you to do today but listen to these stories, get some rest, and fall asleep. And so, let us begin these sleep stories. Inquisitive Mr. Possum. It was Mr. Owl who gave the woodfolk the warning by calling out one night, "To whom it may concern." At least the wood people knew that was what he meant. But anyone else might have thought he just cried, "To-hoo, to-hoo." So when all the animals, both great and small, had gathered round his tree, he told them that in his opinion it was to be a very, very hard winter. That of course meant that they must begin right away to lay up stores, for the cold snowed-in days, and everyone bestirred himself at once to do this. Even Mr. Rabbit, who seldom made much preparation for winter days, began to do up preserves. All the small bunnies were sent out with their baskets to gather corn and beans and beet tops and all sorts of good things. "If we cannot get them green," said Mr. Rabbit to her neighbor, Mrs. Squirrel, "we can eat them stewed. But of course, we much prefer them in the natural state." Mr. Squirrel, to encourage her neighbor in laying up winter stores, gave her a big basketful of walnuts, which Mrs. Rabbit picked out, and some say those were the first walnuts ever pickled. But this story is not about pickled walnuts. It is about the nice preserves that Mrs. Rabbit put up and the accident that befell Mr. Possum. Everybody that passed Mrs. Rabbit's home for many days found it hard to get by her door, for such spicy, nice-smelling odors as came through the open windows made everyone feel hungry. Mr. Possum was especially interested when he found that Mrs. Rabbit was, among other things, putting up a great deal of canned corn, and he decided that when it was dark he would just take a peek into her pantry window and see how many cans she had. Right in front of the window was a tree, and one limb hung low enough so that Mr. Possum, with a little care, could easily swing himself from it and reach the pantry window. Now, this might have been safe enough if the limb had been a good one, but it wasn't. And when Mr. Possum ran along it, before he could even get ready to swing, crackle snap went the limb, and down went Mr. Possum into a barrel of whitewash Mrs. Rabbit had ready to use on her little house. And that was not the worst of it. When he ran home, so scared he didn't remember running at all after it was over. Mrs. Possum didn't know him, but thought he was some terrible white creature, come to carry on her children, and slammed the door right in his face. All night Mr. Possum had to sit outside, the whitewash dripping from his coat, and in the morning, bright and early, all the little bunnies, and Mr. and Mrs. Rabbit as well, were standing in front of the house, looking at him. Mrs. Rabbit wanted to know what he meant by carrying off some of her whitewash. "I tracked you right to your own dooryard, so you need not deny it," she said. Mr. Possum did not try to deny it, for what was the use? He was all covered in the white stuff, but he did try to tell Mr. and Mrs. Rabbit that it was all an accident, that he was just running along the limb and off it broke, and he happened to fall into the whitewash. Mrs. Possum had found out it was her husband by this time, of course, and she came out to say that what Mrs. Rabbit could think they wanted of her whitewash was more than she could tell. Mrs. Rabbit wiggled her nose and looked very wise. "Well," she said, "if that is true, Mr. Possum, that it was all an accident, why, of course, that is all there is to it. But you must admit that it did look suspicious." Mr. Possum admitted that it did, and off ran the rabbit family for home. But it was a long time before Mr. Possum could go abroad again, for the white coat he wore was to be plainly seen in the daytime or at night. What the Flowers Told Martha. Martha was visiting her grandmother, who lived in the country. At the back of the farmhouse was a very large porch, and in the front of that a garden in which grew all kinds of flowers. One afternoon, when everyone else was taking a nap, Martha sat on the porch. It was warm, and a bee was buzzing around the flowers. Every little while he would fly around Martha's head. "I wish I had someone to play with," thought Martha. "Everybody is asleep, and I am lonesome." "The flowers want you to come into the garden," buzzed the bee. Martha listened, for she could not believe the bee was really speaking to her, but she heard again. "The flowers want you to come into the garden." Martha walked down the path to the rose bush. "I'll find out if that bee is telling the truth," she said. "I am so glad you came," said a rose. And as Martha looked, it seemed that she could almost see the face of a little girl in its petals. "I want someone to talk to," said the rose. "So did I," said a lily. "We are glad to see you," said a tulip, "for we never have anyone to talk to." "I never knew before that you could talk," said Martha. "Of course we can," said the rose, "but we are tired of telling stories to one another." "Oh, can you tell stories?" asked Martha as she seated herself on the ground beside the flowers. "Yes, indeed," said the rose. "I'll tell mine first. Did you ever hear how the rose happened to have thorns?" she asked. Martha said she never did, and the rose said, "I will tell you. Before I bloomed here, I lived in the warm climates, and although you may not think it, I also lived in the land where Jack Frost dwells. But I love best the land where the nightingale lives, and tells me of his love. One night, when he was singing and telling me that my perfume was the sweetest in the garden, and my damask cheek the softest, a thorn bush which grew near and had tried many times to win him from me, began to tell how sweet were his notes and how graceful his form. "Do come and sing in my bush," she said, "and let me show you how strong I am. You will be safer in my bush than on the swaying branches of the rose." But the nightingale would not leave me, and told the thorn bush it was far too bold and its sharp points far too treacherous. "You are not so fragrant as the rose," he said, "and my love is all for her." "You shall pay for this," screamed the thorn bush angrily, "and you will find that your beautiful rose has thorns as well as I." But the nightingale only sang lower and more sweetly to me, and we forgot the thorn bush in our happiness. The cruel thorn, however, did not forget or forgive, and one day she twined herself around my roots and pressed into my tender stems until she was a part of me. I tried to cry out, but her strength was greater than mine. That night, when the nightingale came to sing his love song, she raised one of her sharp thorns and pierced his foot. "You see, your beautiful rose has hidden thorns," she said, "and she is no more to be desired than I am." "I should be a poor lover were I not willing to suffer for the one I love," replied the nightingale as he came closer and sang to me even in his pain. "I will always love you," he said. "I know you are not to blame for the thorns you wear, and that my love for you brought this upon you. I will never leave you." And he sang to me all through the night, and in the morning a deep red rose bloomed where the nightingale's bleeding foot had rested. And the thorn bush was more angry than ever when she beheld its beauty. "You shall never be free," she said to me. "Every rose shall wear a thorn." The nightingale still sings to me, and never fails to tell me of his undying love. "That is a very pretty story," said Martha, as the rose finished, "and I'm glad to know about that thorn, for I have wondered many times why a flower so beautiful as you had that sharp point under your soft leaves." "Martha, Martha," someone called from the doorway, and Martha jumped up. "Come back tomorrow and hear my story," said the tiger lily. "And mine," said the tulip. "And mine," called out the jonquil. Martha promised that she would, and ran toward the house. The next day, as soon as Martha found herself alone, she ran into the garden, for she was curious to hear the promised stories. The jonquil spoke first. "My story," it said with dignity, "will be historical. I am a descendant from the great Narcissus family, and the narcissus, as you know, is a very beautiful flower. It grows in a wild profusion among the stony places along the great Mediterranean and eastward to China. All that you may have heard, but do you know why Narcissus loves to be near the water?" Martha said she did not. I will tell you, replied the jonquil. Ages and ages ago, Narcissus was the son of a river god. He was extremely vain of his extraordinary beauty, which he beheld for the first time in the water. He sought out all the pools in the woods and would spend hours gazing at his reflection. And at last he fell in love with his own image. Narcissus could neither eat nor sleep. So fascinated did he become with his reflection. He would put his lips near to the water to kiss the lips he saw, and plunge his arms into it, to embrace the form he loved, which, of course, fled at his touch, and then returned after a moment to mock him. "Why cannot you love me?" he would say to the image. "The nymphs have loved me, and I can see love in your eyes." Which, of course, he did, for he did not know he was gazing at his own reflection. At last he pined away and died, and in the place of his body was found a beautiful flower, with soft white petals, nodding to its reflection in the water. "The daffodils are also my cousins," the jonquil explained, "and descendant from the beautiful Narcissus." "That is a very pretty story," said Martha, "and the fate of Narcissus should teach all vain people a lesson." The tiger lily told her story next. "Mine is not a love story," she said. "It is about something I saw in far-off China before I bloomed here. In that land, little girls are not so happy as they are here, because the boys are the pride of the family. One day, a poor beggar, who was faint from hunger and thirst, lay down close beside where I bloomed. He groaned aloud in his misery, and a little girl who was passing heard him. She came to him and gave him water from a nearby stream and bathed his face. When he was refreshed, he asked, 'Who are you, and how did you happen to be here?' 'I am only a miserable daughter on her way to the mission,' she replied. 'My father is very poor and can provide only for his sons. If I can reach the mission, they will take me in, and I shall be taught many things.' The beggar only shook his head. He did not believe that a girl was worth even thanking, and that anyone should bother to teach her was past his belief. And so the little girl passed on. 'I am telling you this story,' said the tiger lily, 'that you may know how much good your pennies do that you drop into the missionary box. For you see, by the kind act of that little girl, the Chinese girls are worth saving, for they are kind and good and grow up to be a blessing to their country.'" "What became of the beggar?" asked Martha. "The little girl reached the mission," the lily said, "and they sent someone from there to take the beggar away. Very likely the missionaries took care of him." "I am glad you told me that story," said Martha. "I shall try to save more pennies now to send to the little girls in China." The tulip spoke next. "I'm afraid," she said, "that my story will not be very interesting. But I don't suppose that many people know that I bloomed long ago in Constantinople, the city of beautiful hills, where the mosque and the tombs and the fountains make a strange picture in the moonlight. There the ladies wear queerly draped gowns, and their veiled faces leave only their bright eyes exposed. Afterward I bloomed in a country where everybody seemed happy, and that is the land I love best. The children in that country look like little stuffed dolls, in their many petticoats and close-fitting bonnets around their chubby little faces. Their little shoes clatter over the stones, sounding like many horses in the distance. There I was best loved and grew in profusion and beauty around the quaint homes of these quaint-looking people. Ah me, it is a long way from here, sighed the tulip. And I often long to hear the sound of the Zuiderzee as I did once long ago. Why, she has gone to sleep, said Martha, as the tulip closed and drooped her head. And I must go in the house. Grandmother will be looking for me. Will you come again? Asked the flowers. There are many more that have stories to tell. I shall be glad to hear them, said Martha, for I had no idea that flowers could tell such interesting stories. When Jack Frost was young. Not that he is old now, for Jack is a snappy, bright fellow, and will never really grow old. That is, in anything but experience. And that is exactly what this story is about. The time when Jack Frost was young in experience, and would not listen to his mother, old Madam North Wind. One morning he awoke and hustled about with a will, and Madam North Wind, who had not yet begun to arise early in the morning, was aroused from her slumbers. Whatever are you doing, making such a noise at this time in the morning? She asked her son. It is time I was on my round, said Jack Frost in a snappy, sharp tone. I mean to begin early and not let all the farmers get ahead of me and get their corn and pumpkins and such things in the barn. They will have to look out for me. I tell you, Mother, I am a sharp, snappy young fellow, and they must know it. You go back to your bed, said old Madam North Wind. It is not time for frosts yet. You should not begin your rounds for another 2 weeks at least. Oh, Mother, you are so old-fashioned, said Jack Frost. I want to be up and doing. Those farmers think they know everything there is to know about the weather, and I want to show them I am too smart for them. I shall start off tonight. You listen to me if you do not wish to spoil all your beautiful colored pictures, Jack, said his mother. I may be old-fashioned, but I know what the beauty of your work is worth. And if you do not wish to lose your reputation as an artist, you go back to your bed and wait until I call you. But Jack Frost, like many a son, thought his mother was far too old-fashioned. But to keep her from fretting, he crept into bed again and kept still until he was sure his mother was asleep. All day he kept quiet, and when the darkness came, he listened to make sure old Madam North Wind was still sleeping before he crept softly out of his bed. Very quietly he got out his big white coat and cap, and then he filled his big white bag with white shiny frost from his mother's chest. He filled the bag full and then shook it down and put in more. I'll give them a good one tonight, he said, laughing at the thought of the surprise he would give the farmers. Then he crept softly past his sleeping mother, and out he went, flying swiftly over hill and dale. All around he spread the white frost, and when at last he finished his work, the old sun man, looking over the crest of the hill, was horrified when he looked upon the white world. "You rascal!" he shouted after Jack Frost's flying shape. "You are far too early. You have spoiled all your pictures for this year." "Old silly, what does he know?" said Jack as he hurried along. "He's just like Mother, old-fashioned." Jack got softly into bed, and not until his mother called him did he awake again. "Come," she said one day, "it is time now for you to be about your work, and your pictures should be gorgeous in their colorings this year. Be careful, my son. Scatter your frost tonight lightly, and again tomorrow night. I will go out in the morning and see how things look." Jack Frost did not tell his mother he had been out before. He did not need to tell her, for the next morning, before old Madam North Wind had gone far, she knew what had happened. "They are all spoiled," she said as she looked over the landscape. "All black and dead. Before they had a bit of color." "Come out and look at your work," she said, going back for her son. "You thought you knew more about it than your old mother." Jack Frost had no idea what old Madam North Wind meant, but he felt sure something was wrong. So he followed his mother very meekly. But when they reached the forest, he knew something was wrong indeed. No bright and beautifully colored leaves and bushes met his gaze. All were brown and black. "What is the matter with my pictures?" he asked. "I thought they would be very beautiful this year." "You stole out before it was time, and you not only surprised the farmers, but you spoiled all your gorgeous pictures and cheated all the people who looked for them. There will be none this year, because you thought you knew more than I. Go home. There is no work for you, and perhaps you will listen to me next year and not get up until I call you." Jack Frost went home, a sadder but wiser fellow, and the next year he slept and did not put his frosty nose out from under his blanket, until old Madam North Wind called him. The Revenge of the Fireflies. The Fireflies and the Goblins had always been good friends, just as they were with the fairies, until one night when the Goblins held a frolic in the woods and did not invite the Fireflies to come. It was a bright moonlight night, and the Goblins, who did not think much about anyone or anything if it did not in some way help them, knew they would not need the Fireflies' lanterns. So they did not bother to send them an invitation. When the moon was high up in the sky, so it shone down on all the trees in the woods, making it almost like daylight, the Goblins came tumbling out of their rocks and began their frolic. They tumbled and they played such antics in the moonlight that anyone who did not know who they were and had seen them would surely have thought them a lot of crazy little creatures. Of course, the Fireflies came flying along, and when they saw what was going on, they began asking one another if anyone had received an invitation. "It is plain to be seen why they did not invite us," said one old Firefly. "They did not need us because the moon is shining." "That shows us what their friendship is worth," said another. "If they need our lights, they invite us. If not, we are forgotten." For a few minutes all the Fireflies flashed with anger, and then the old Firefly said, "I think we can have revenge if all of you will do as I tell you. and if I am not much mistaken, those goblin fellows will remember us the next time they have a frolic, even if they do not need us." All the fireflies wanted to know what the old firefly had in his mind, but not a word would he tell them about his plan until he ran about and called together all the fireflies for miles and miles around. Of course, it did not take those sprightly little creatures long to fly miles and miles. And pretty soon, in one corner of the woods, were gathered together thousands of fireflies. "My plan is this," said the old firefly when they were all there. "The goblins are to go sailing on the lily pads after the frolic, and we will go around to all the rocks and alight on all of them, for that is where they live, and when they return from their sail, they will think their homes are on fire. Shine as brightly as you can, every one of you, and don't wink or blink, so the goblins will not suspect us. They will have a good fright, if nothing else." Away went the fireflies in groups of thousands, and pretty soon all the rocks in the woods were covered. But not until the goblins returned from their moonlight sail did the fireflies let their bright lights be seen. The goblins stopped, every one, when they reached the woods, for all the rocks were a blaze of light. "Oh, our homes!" they cried. "Someone has set them on fire. What shall we do?" Hither and thither, like little beetles they flew, but it was no use. They could not enter their homes. They were all on fire. "Where shall we sleep?" they began to ask one another, for they were all very tired of the frolic. "We can crawl under the leaves," said one goblin, "but we dare not sleep, for if the fairies should find us, no knowing what they would do to us with their wands. We will have to stay awake all night, and in the morning, if the fire is out, we can crawl into our homes, for, of course, the rocks cannot burn." "No, but they can be very hot and burn us," said another. "Oh dear, I wish we had not gone sailing. Perhaps we could have saved our homes." So under the leaves they crawled, but not a wink of sleep did those goblins dare take. And when it was most daylight time, the fireflies put out their lights and silently flew away. When the goblins went to the rocks, they were surprised to find them all cool and not at all hot as they had expected. And one of the goblins, putting a pointed little finger on the side of his pointed nose, said to the others, "I have a thought, and it is this. The fireflies were not invited to our frolic, and I wonder if they alighted on our rocks for revenge." "I wonder," said the others, but they were all so sleepy they could not think. So in they tumbled and were soon fast asleep. But the next time they gave a frolic, the very first thing they did was to invite all the fireflies, and not one did they forget. Sally Hicks' Forefinger. Sally Hicks was a little girl who was good most of the time, but she had one bad habit, and that was caused by her forefinger on her right hand. Sally's right-hand forefinger would get into things it should not, and it cost Sally's mother a great deal of trouble. And most of Sally's punishments were on account of that unruly right-hand forefinger. One day Sally's mother set a dish of hot jelly on the kitchen table to cool. She told Sally it was hot, and she must not touch it. But no sooner was her mother out of the kitchen, and the cook's head was turned another way, than Sally Hicks forgot all about her mother's warning, and the naughty right-hand forefinger went right into the hot jelly. Oh, how Sally screamed with pain, and she forgot all about putting the forefinger in her mouth to taste the jelly. It burned her so. The big tears ran right down Sally's pretty pink cheeks, and her mother and grandmother and cook, too, came running to see what was the matter. The little forefinger told the story, and it had to be wrapped in some cooling salve and a soft piece of linen. I told you that some day you would get that finger burned, said her mother, and now, because you disobeyed me, you must sit in the big chair in the hall until lunchtime and not speak to anyone. I want you to think about that naughty finger. Sally's grandmother passed her in the hall and leaned over and kissed her. I am sorry that grandmother's little girl was so naughty, she said. Good little girls mind their mothers, and they don't get burnt fingers. Sally watched her grandmother go upstairs, and then Sally looked at her picture hanging on the wall of her great-grandmother. I wonder if Grandmother Great ever had to punish grandmother, thought Sally. I wonder if grandmothers were always very good little girls. Sally looked at her grandfather Great too, and wondered how it was that, though the Greats were the father and mother of her own dear grandmother, they had nice black hair, all smooth and shiny, while her grandmother and grandfather too had white hair. Sally looked at the forefinger, all wrapped about with the white cloth, and she thought how dreadful it would be to have her finger big and long as it looked now. Then she looked at Grandmother Great again, and her eyes seemed to be looking right at that little burnt forefinger. Sally put her right hand behind her, but the eyes of Grandmother Great looked right at Sally. Sally winked her eyes and looked again, for she thought her Grandmother Great smiled at her. Sally looked hard at the picture, and Grandmother Great seemed to shake her head at Sally. Didn't your little girl ever do anything naughty with her forefinger? Asked Sally. Grandmother Great smiled. I had several little girls once, but they were all good little girls, said Grandmother Great. Always, every bit of the time? Questioned Sally. Yes, I cannot remember now they ever did anything naughty, said Grandmother Great. But you know, dear, it was a long time ago. I had my little girls, a very long time ago. Perhaps you forget when it is a long time ago, said Sally. Didn't your little girls ever put their forefinger in anything just to taste it? Oh dear, yes. I remember now that your grandmother did put her forefinger, the right-hand forefinger it was too, in the wheel of the wringer once, to see what would happen, said Grandmother Great. Did she cry? Asked Sally. Oh dear, yes, poor little girlie, she cried, and I was so frightened I cried too. Her poor little finger never grew quite as it should at the end, said Grandmother Great with a sigh. Do mothers cry when little girls get burned, putting their fingers into things they should not? Asked Sally. Of course they do, my dear. Mothers have many a cry over their little girls when they are naughty, said Grandmother Great. I don't want Mother to cry, said Sally. Of course you don't, my dear, said Grandmother Great. So you will not put your finger in anything again, will you? Before Sally could promise her Grandmother Great she would be a good little girl, she heard someone say, "Sally, Sally, come to lunch." Sally opened her eyes, for she had been asleep, dreaming all this time, and there stood her mother in the doorway. "Mother, do mothers forget how naughty the little girls were when they grow up?" asked Sally. "I think so," said her mother. "I hope you will be so good before you grow up that I shall forget how naughty you were this morning." "Grandmother Great told me mothers did forget their little girls were naughty ever after they grow up," said Sally. "You mean your grandmother told you, not Grandmother Great," said Sally's mother. "You never saw Grandmother Great, dear." "Well, she told me so just now," said Sally. "And she said, too, that Grandmother put her finger in the wheel of the wringing machine once, and that she cried because Grandmother, who was her little girl then, cried and was hurt." "What is the child talking about?" said Sally's mother. "She has been asleep and dreamed it," said Sally's grandmother, taking Sally in her arms. "I showed her my forefinger when it was hurt, when I was a little girl, and told her she must look out for her forefinger, or she might get it terribly hurt, just as I did." "Did you think the picture of Grandmother Great spoke to you?" she asked Sally, holding her close in her arms. "She did," said Sally, "and she said mothers always cried when their little girls are naughty." "Oh, mother dear, I don't want to make you cry. I won't put my finger in anything again. Truly, I won't," sobbed Sally. "She isn't half awake yet," said her grandmother, as Sally's mother took her in her arms and kissed her. Sally kept her promise, even if she did dream about Grandmother Great talking to her. And the right-hand forefinger did not get her into any more trouble. Sally Hicks often looks at the portraits in the hall of Grandmother and Grandfather Great, but Grandmother Great never has spoken to her since that day. But Sally Hicks smiles at her, and sometimes the eyes seem to smile back, and Sally wonders if they really do.